Well, welcome to the second Intro to Management lecture. It's not a lecture, I should say, just a mini video capturing some of the main stuff. All right, so theme of the week, understanding yourself and others. Before I start, let me say that I'm personally a big fan of this particular theme and this particular topic, and I believe it's an essential but often underrated component of developing yourself as a manager. Unless you are a very good person from birth, unless you are born with all the natural talent that you require to do every aspect of management from the moment you were in nappies, you've got a lot of development to do. You've got a long way to go, and no matter what stage you are at your career, you can always do better. And unless you develop a magical insight into yourself, and humans have an enormous amount of blindness when it comes to their own faults, you will benefit from accurate feedback from people around you. And learning to be open to listening to that feedback in a way that doesn't distort that feedback, and which is an accurate way of bringing it into yourself without damaging your own ego so much that you can't carry out any change. That's a delicate process, but it's one that we should always be open to. We need to realize that we weren't born perfect, and we weren't born suited for every role that's thrown at us in life. And as a manager, you'll have many different roles, different requirements thrown at you, and crises require you to be a very different person sometimes than what you might have been born to be. So in relation to individual differences, which are what we're talking about here, there's stuff that you're born with and is relatively stable, the personality side of things. And people often use the word, psychology often uses the word of traits or personality traits, and that is kind of implying that these are things that are quite fixed, pervasive across different settings, and things that you're born with, difficult to change. Whereas learned skills in the area of developing are a little bit more optimistic, you could say. We can look to develop these skills in life, and to me there's a little bit of an overlap between these two, and I don't, even though I am a psychologist and I understand the literature in relation to personality, things like extroversion or neuroticism, I understand how difficult it is to change it, but I think that that isn't a signal that we should give up on change as we get older, or even as we develop from quite a young age. I believe we're a work in progress, and there's evidence that elements of personality can be learned and developed. So some of the big issues that we're talking about, emotional intelligence tends to be intelligence that relates to our own understanding of ourselves, but it also has an element of social intelligence, our ability to read other people. So emotional intelligence tends to be associated with competence on an intrapersonal or within oneself. Intra means within oneself level, whereas social intelligence tends to be related to your competencies or your ability to handle things between people. And as you can imagine, a lot of management literature focuses on this component somewhat at the expense of this component. I was talking before about the malleable elements, the things that can be changed, and there is in fact very little evidence that emotional intelligence can be improved, even though there's a lot of lovely #1 best-selling textbooks that kind of imply that they can be changed. That again, I'd say, doesn't mean we should give up. Something worth doing is worth fighting for. So the process of developing yourself as a manager is reducing, as I said at the outset, reducing the unknowns, and in particularly hunting out the things that you don't know about yourself and you don't even know that you don't know. And these are the particularly obstinate elements of one's personality. And you can only find out about these things by actively seeking feedback and actively and honestly acknowledging that feedback. The Johari window is an area that looks at this. You might have heard the term 360 degrees feedback. I think that's something that should be formalized in every organization without going through a lot of the bullshit associated with that. But 360 degrees feedback means that you actively and honestly are seeking feedback from people below you, and people above you, and people on the same level of you all around, and not just through formal processes, in my opinion, either. So the text gives you some useful exercises to go through on how to analyze yourself and solicit feedback, and how to listen, and how to stop and reflect on the feedback that you receive. As a manager myself, I developed a technique which I found was quite effective, of I would go to staff, and if I had this sort of sneaking suspicion that, for example, I had a flaw that was causing problems for the organisation, I'd go to them and in a really confessional sense say to them with facial feedback saying, look, tell me if I'm wrong. But I'd say, look, well, I'll take one of my known faults, which is lack of organisation, dislike of paperwork. I'd say to them, yeah, I realise the fact that I'm not prepared to, put things down on paper properly is a major problem to you guys. I'd say to the factory staff, for example. And I'd wait for the feedback, but I'd make it easy for them to tell me yes. Not say, everything okay here, guys? Oh, yeah, everything's okay. That kind of feedback is as good as useless. If you think that means everything's okay, then you're truly kidding yourself. So there are techniques you can use. I just want to draw your attention to this book, which is by Susan Cain, called Quiet. It was a #1 bestseller, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And there is a tradition within management literature and within a lot of the popular management literature in particular that you see in the glossy magazines on business that you'll get at a newsstand. There's a very strong emphasis on the powerful leader who's charismatic, what we call transformational leaders, who are good at talking, good at selling a message, making people believe in them. And there is this kind of prejudice that that's the only kind of effective leadership there is. This book is a nice antidote to that, and a lot of you out there, a lot of academics and a lot of students are here partly because you're a bit different to that. You're more self-reflective, you're quieter, you're less of a party animal. Despite the reputation that students have, there's plenty of extroverts out there amongst you. This book shows the value in terms of, for example, creativity or forming bonds, meaningful bonds, forming structures and handling politics at work, that people who are introverted, people who are a little quieter and less showy, than can have within an organisation. So I think that's a lovely book to read when you've got a little bit of spare time, which I can imagine you don't have very much of at all. Just a reminder to contact me if there's any problems with the course that you're developing, if you're having some questions about the assignments, particularly Flex students, do contact me, o.merlink@cqu.edu or through the Moodle site. Thanks very much.